Okay, today I'm going to be looking at a bit of blues. It's been a while since I've done anything bluesy, and I know that quite a few of you are into that kind of thing. And I was thinking about what I was going to look at today. And I mean, as far as my taste in blues music goes, I prefer the older school stuff. If I'm honest, I don't listen to much contemporary blues music. Maybe I should be listening to some more modern blues stuff if anyone's got any recommendations. But as far as the song choice goes, today I'm looking at a real classic, The Stumble, as played by Peter Green. And I'm going to be discussing his approach to the track. I'm also going to be talking more generally about how to improvise over these quite interesting chords and do your own thing. So I'm going to begin by playing through a bit of the track for you. What I'm going to try and do is play the first two choruses as Peter Green plays them, or as close as I can get to sounding and playing like Peter Green, which might not be that close. And then I'm going to improvise a little solo of my own, and then we'll break things down. Let me tell you a little bit about this track. Originally, this one was a Freddie King composition. He actually wrote it with another person called Sonny Thompson, who I don't know anything about. And that was in 1961-62, I think. And it went on quite quickly to become a blues classic and a blues standard. And it's been covered and recorded by all kinds of different people. There's a great Gary Moore version. I think Jeff Beck has done it. But as I said at the start of this video, I'm focusing on the Peter Green version, which you can hear on the record A Hard Road, which he did with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers from 1967. And the way that Peter Green plays it is fairly close to the original Freddie King version. He plays it a little bit faster, a bit more intensity, a higher gain kind of sound. It's a little bit more virtuosic, but the basics of the track are the same. It's the same key, the same chords, and those basic melodies are played more or less exactly the same way. Let's get started then. I'm going to start by breaking down the chord progression and the harmony. Then I'm going to go through what Peter Green is playing in his first two choruses in quite a bit of detail. And then I want to talk more generally about how you might improvise over this track and do your own thing. I want to start by discussing the form and the harmony of this piece, because although it's a blues in the key of E, it's not your regular 12-bar blues. And in fact, we've got a 16-bar form, and we've got two separate 8-bar sections with some quite sophisticated chord changes going on. And the most striking thing when you first hear this one is we're not starting on the 1 chord, we're actually starting on the 4 chord, which is an A or an A7. And at first sight, it might seem like the piece is in the key of A, but although it starts on that A7 chord, it definitely establishes itself as being in the key of E, and E is the kind of the home and the tonal centre of the piece. So in that first 8-bar section, we're starting on an A7 chord, 2 bars of that, and then we're going to the 1 chord, another 2 bars on that, back to the 4 chord, and then we've got the 5 chord. So that's the first 8-bar section. You can kind of play these chords however you want. There's no rhythm guitar on this track. There's kind of piano which is outlining the harmony, but I'm just playing this C form 1 chord, and then I'm playing the 4 chord and the 5 chord as these 7th bar chord grips. And then we've got the second 8-bar section, you've got these stops. The whole band plays these stops. So we're starting off on the 1 chord, and then we go to the 4 chord, and then we've got this kind of interesting sound here. This is a diminished 7th chord, so the sharp 4 diminished chord, reasonably common sound in the blues. It's really as though you're playing the 4 chord and then just raising the root by a semitone. You've got that A sharp diminished sound, and then we've got this quite jazzy turnaround, this series of chords, and that goes like this. We've got so it's a 1-6-2-5, very common in the jazz world. And in fact, if you listen to the Freddie King, the original recording, it has got quite a big kind of jazz swing influence on that track, I think. So we've got 1. The 6th chord would be a C sharp 7. I'm playing that as a dominant 7th chord. Then we've got the 2 chord. It's going to be an F sharp. You could either play that as a 7th chord, a dominant chord, or a minor chord, or a minor 7th chord. And then we've got the 5 chord, the B7. And then we're back home to the 1. And then just to wrap things up, a little bit hard to hear what's going on the recording. I think the bass is doing that kind of idea. So I suppose the implied chords we've got here are maybe something like that. So 1, 4, 1, and back to 5 again. So those are the basic chords. I think it's really important you know those chords and understand the harmony before you start playing over the top of this one. And of course, if you're playing this tune with somebody else, you can always play the rhythm guitar while the other person takes a solo. Let's move on to the first chorus that Peter Green plays, and I'm using the term chorus just to describe each of these 16-bar sections. And before we get into the specifics, it might be worth thinking about note choice more generally, and in terms of scale shapes. If you do want to think in terms of scale patterns here, I think there are 3 or 4 essential scale patterns that are really important to know, and it might help you get to grips with this tune a bit more quickly. And the first of those is the E major pentatonic, and he's often playing around the 9th position here. So you've got this scale, pentatonic. You can also play that up here around the 12th fret. I like to relate these scale shapes to chords. So this one here would be the E form in caged terms, and the one that I just played before that would be the G form. So those are our major pentatonic scales, and he's kind of mixing the major and the minor pentatonics a lot in this tune as well, and he's using the E minor pentatonic quite a lot of the time. He's in this position here at the 7th fret. So this is the A form of the E minor pentatonic. And then he's also playing the good old pattern 1 E minor pentatonic up in the 12th position as well. So it might be worth thinking about those scale shapes as you learn this piece. So the opening phrase is this. And this is coming right out of that E major pentatonic scale that I just discussed. So we're playing on the middle 2 strings, a pair of hammer-ons, and then we're bending the 11th fret on the 3rd string. It's one of those bends where you don't want to hear the bend coming down again, so you just want to mute the string at the top of the bend. So I'm kind of muting with my picking hand here. You can just use the side of your picking hand, or sometimes I just let the string touch my pick like that, and also release pressure with this hand, and then you get a nice clean bend. And you can see those notes as coming from the E major pentatonic scale, though we are playing over the 4 chord over the A7 at that point, but those notes are still going to work. Then we've got an answering phrase. And this has got more of a minor pentatonic flavour. I'm choosing to play this around the 7th position here. You could actually play the same phrase up a bit higher on the lower set of strings. I'm just going by tone, listening to the recording. It kind of sounds like Peter Green is playing it here. It doesn't particularly matter where you play this stuff as long as you get the notes right, but this is a fairly straightforward phrase. So kind of just playing the E minor pentatonic scale, got the bend there at the 10th fret on the B string. And we're coming down the scale, we've got a quick slide down into the 5th position. And this is nice, we're landing on the major 3rd, so the lick starts off minor and then it turns major at the end and hits that chord tone. So that's the 2nd phrase. And then we've got this. Starts off the same as the 1st phrase. And then we've got these little hits on the A7 chord here. It's actually, I'm primarily hearing these 2 notes here. So 12 on the B and 12 on the G, perhaps 11 on the D string as well. It's like an A9th kind of sound, and we're just accenting those chords. You can hold down the entire chord shape if you want to, but I'm emphasizing strings 2 and 3 here. And then we've got another answering phrase. So great phrasing in this, all this kind of call and response stuff. So the answering phrase this time, again, it's E minor pentatonic, but we've got... So it starts off in that little box here in the 7th position. Then we're working our way down again with a slide, and then back up again. And I think there's then just some open string noise in that gap, and then we've got the next 8-bar section with these stops, and we're going to continue like this. So quite simple, but I just love the authority that he's playing with here. Just really nice clear phrases, a nice attack. So we're starting off minor pentatonic and then we're moving up into the major pentatonic here. So you can think in terms of boxes here. You've got these little 4-note box in the minor pentatonic scale, and then this kind of little overlapping 4-note box up in this major pentatonic pattern. Now, then we've got a fantastic lick which goes like this. This is a great mishmash of major and minor. If you like, you can think about your E major pentatonic scale and the E minor pentatonic or E blues scale in the same position. And you can kind of have those 2 scale shapes, superimposed over one another, and you can just mix and match the notes from those scale patterns. I mean, I've got no idea if Peter Green kind of thought in terms of scale patterns and shapes. I'm sure he did to some extent, but for me it's quite helpful to think in those terms. So the actual lick. And then we've got... And then we're into this great descending double stops section. I'm just taking this little shape down the fretboard really, so 12 on the G and high E strings, just moving it down, so fret 12, 9, 7, 4, sliding to 2, and then open strings. I'm playing that with a little bit of hybrid picking, so picking on the 3rd string, using the middle finger on the top string, and quite straightforward, just moving that shape around, but it is played quite fast, so this is actually quite challenging to play at the speed of the recording and to maintain accuracy. So you want to start slowly on this, and I'm just using the fret markers to start with to help me here, so 12, 9 and 7. And then the 4th fret here, there's no fret marker there, kind of in between these 2 markers. And sliding down to the open strings. And then the first 16 bars wraps up with this classic blues turnaround lick. So classic bit of blues vocabulary, really worth learning this one. So we've just got open strings, and then this D note. And we're sliding up into this little shape here, so 4 on the G, 3 on the B, coming down and hitting that root note, open top string, and then a D and a B. Then we're on into the 2nd chorus, and this starts in exactly the same way. I mean, there might be a few subtle nuances that are different, but essentially it's just a repeat. So That's the next 8 bars. Then it's different. We've got another stops section, and Peter Green is playing some different licks. So it starts off with this fantastic lick. Love this lick. So we're in our pattern 1 minor pentatonic scale to start with. So it starts off with a fairly standard bluesy idea. And then we've got, it's all just minor pentatonic, but the rhythm is great, and it's nice the way he moves through the scale. Often he's kind of rolling between notes on the same fret, so that kind of idea there, 14th fret, and here as well. So you're going to need to just roll your third finger to maintain separation between those notes. Coming down to this G note here, then it continues. And this is played over the diminished chord here. It's just a nice little double stop shape. So 14 on the A, 12 on the D. Just moving that down. And then it continues as before. We've got the double stops. And the turnaround lick played as before. And if you're serious about learning this tune, then that is what I would prioritise. So learning those first 2 choruses more or less note for note. I think those are all kind of signature parts of this tune. And then Peter Green goes off into more of a kind of improvised series of solos. And personally, I've not learned all of those solos note for note. I mean, that would be a massive amount of work. If you are a big Peter Green fan and you don't mind a lot of hard work, then I'm sure it would be valuable to learn some of those solos. But personally, I find it more valuable to maybe learn a lick or two, but to understand what he's doing, and then I'm able to improvise my own solo in keeping with what he's doing and in keeping with the spirit of the track. So what I'm going to do is just discuss some of the options you've got playing over these chords. And the good news is, if you are more of a beginner, you can just use the E minor pentatonic scale and you can make that work over the entire track. It's going to work, it's going to sound good. Peter Green is using a lot of E minor pentatonic over this one, but if you do want to get more sophisticated, then it's worth mixing in some other approaches as well. So some of that major pentatonic stuff, and also an awareness of which chord you're playing over at any given moment, so you can have more of a chord tone approach. And that's what you hear Peter Green doing. I'm sure it's quite a natural thing. He obviously was very gifted and had an amazing ear, so he does tend to sort of hit the good sounding notes at any given moment in this piece. So over the first 8 bars, we're kicking off on that 4 chord. Over that 4 chord, you can really go major or minor, or you can think arpeggios and chord tones. One obvious option would just be to base your improvisation on the same notes that Peter Green plays at the start of the tune. So this little box here, and you can just improvise around that. So that's going to sound good, and you can see that as coming from that E major pentatonic scale. So you can play E major pentatonic over this 4 chord here. The only thing you have to be slightly careful with is playing this note here, this G sharp, which over an A7 chord, it sounds a little bit off. So you have to be slightly careful with that note there. You could in fact play the A major pentatonic, and then all of the notes would work. So those are some things you can think about. That you can also just think arpeggios. So A7 arpeggio there. I quite like using arpeggios just as kind of guidelines really. They're showing me the strong target notes, and then I can blend in kind of licks and pentatonic stuff around that. So those are some options over that 4 chord. You can of course just play E minor pentatonic there as well. And then for the 1 chord, why not come down play some E minor pentatonic, some E blues scale stuff around here. You can come up a little bit higher. Play some kind of classic blues licks up in the 12th position as well. Then you can just repeat that kind of thing. We're going back to the 4 chord, and then we got the 5 chord, And 5-chord options, probably the obvious thing to do would be to stick with the minor pentatonic there, with the E minor pentatonic, though you kind of want to emphasize some chord tones there as well. So emphasizing that B note would be a good one, or that A, which is the flat 7. You can of course play arpeggios there to hit the major third. That D sharp is another good note to hit on the 5 chord. Then we're into the next 8 bars, the second half of the form, and for the most part Peter Green is basing his solo on just E minor pentatonic and E blues scale. Lots of classic licks in there. I particularly like his use of double stops, so this kind of thing. And you can play that at the 10th fret there, or up here. And lots of quite fast triplet based licks as well. Those kind of ideas, all just E minor pentatonic. That works really well over the E7 and the A7 chords. And then over this diminished chord, I mean, the E minor pentatonic will just work over that chord. You don't need to kind of overthink this diminished chord there. But if you did want to kind of signal that chord a little bit, you could target that A sharp note, and it so happens that A sharp note is in the blues scale. It's the flat 5th. So that would definitely be a good note to target over that diminished chord. You know, if you wanted to get more sophisticated, you could do your diminished 7th arpeggio, I suppose. You could kind of unleash some Yngwie Malmsteen licks or something at that point. Maybe that's a little bit stylistically inappropriate, but that's your choice. I'm all for a little bit of stylistic inappropriateness from time to time, but probably the safest approach is just to stick to the blues scale there, emphasizing that flat 5th, and that quite nicely outlines that chord. And then for the turnaround section, you could again just stick with the E minor pentatonic, or you could maybe go back to the major pentatonic there. I think that sounds good. I think at the end of my little solo, I can't remember exactly what I played, but I think it was a kind of a bit of a major pentatonic going into minor pentatonic at the end. And there's actually one great lick that Peter Green plays, I think a couple of times in his solos. It's something like this. We've got that idea there, which I really love, and the rhythm is great, and also the note choice. So you've got that kind of bend up to the major third. Again, this kind of moving across the frets in a nice way. A great turnaround lick, well worth sealing that one, I think. So that's kind of it. I think I've said all that I want to say about this one. I mean, I could have made a 5-hour video and gone note for note through all of his solos, doing an analysis of all of that stuff. If you did want to do that, I suggest just listening to the recording, transcribing it, and you can get something out of that approach. But as I've already said, I think it's better to understand the tune, look at what Peter Green is doing, and then improvise some ideas of your own. So I suggest learning the chords. You can maybe just do a little loop of that 16-bar form and play over the top. You can, of course, use a backing track. Use my backing track, which is going to be available on the Patreon page too. The gear that I'm using today, and I've got a Peter Green-ish kind of a rig happening here, I think. So I'm using my Les Paul. Peter Green got a very famous Les Paul. It's a 59 Les Paul, but I think there was something wrong with the wiring when he got it from the factory, and that was the source of his quite unique sound. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think the pickups were out of phase or something, and then when he had the pickup selector in the middle position, you got this quite unusual tone which you can hear on a lot of his recordings. So I can't do that, but I have got a 59 reissue Les Paul, which I think gets quite close to his sound. Amp-wise today I've gone Marshall. I believe that Peter Green used a Marshall on the Hard Road album. I think it was a JTM 45. I seem to recall reading that. I might be wrong, but this Marshall behind me works pretty well. It's a studio vintage series, and it's based on a plexi style Marshall. I'm actually recording that today through the Universal Audio aux box, which is sitting on top, and it's a power attenuator, and you can also record directly through that, and that's just quite a convenient thing for me to do when I'm making these videos. It means I don't have to try and talk and teach over a really loud amp. That's it for this video. This was a fun one to put together, and let me know if you'd like to see some more blues and I will make that happen. Would you like to see some more older school stuff, or are there any more modern blues artists that you'd like to see me cover? Let me know. And of course, if you would like the tab and backing track to accompany this lesson, those are going to be up on my Patreon page. Thanks for watching. See you next time.